When did I hear about EAG and why do I want to work with that organization? So I was a guest. One of my partners, my co-writer, John L. Peacock, he and I are partnered on a writers project that we got hired to do from Munich in Munich, Germany. And we finished it and we're just like editing and everything. But he invited me to this weekly reading that he does. And this particular week, he usually does one playwright and like a full-length play. This particular week, it was like 5 or 6 playwrights, and they were all doing short pieces. And this lady and the guy, this older lady and this younger man, both members of EAG, the Episcopal Actors Guild, were talking to another writer, because I was just a guest. And they were talking to another writer about his piece, and they're like, "Oh, you should bring this piece to the Episcopal Actors Guild, blah blah blah." And they love to do series on Black artists and blah blah blah. And I was like, well, I want to submit something to the Episcopal Actors Guild, but I didn't. And then, like Kismet, about a month and a half later, I'm on Facebook, and then I'm in a lot of different, actor and writer groups, and I see a submission notice from EAG asking for Black writers to submit projects for this upcoming event they have called Black Voices. And so I submitted my piece, Little Black Bear, and he said he was going to get back to me in like 3 days, and then actually about 20-30 minutes later, he got back to me. He was like, "I love the piece. I want the piece to be in the festival." And I was like, "I'd love to." So, and it went from there. Hi, my name is Christopher Raishun Marshall. I'm the playwright of Little Black Bear. And if you want to know more about my play and the event, Black Voices, please watch this video. So the main story arc of Little Black Bear is 2 of my ancestors, Elizal and Minerva. They're married. Minerva's pregnant. They have a land and a farm, and they have sharecroppers that work for them. Black sharecropper or Negro sharecroppers that work for them. And Minerva is upset with Elizal, because she gets this letter, or he gets a letter that she reads that says that he's about to accept the deal from this white man who's supposed to come over later. They essentially get into a debate or an argument about what this deal is, and the white man shows up, and the deal is he's allowing Elizal to keep the land, keep his 600 acres of land, provided that he pay taxes on it, pending that he take a census. And in the census, it's a census that's basically erasing his identity as an Indian, or as an American Indian. He has to identify with Negro. His wife has to identify with mulatto in order for them to. It's like a test, and they're giving you the answer. Like, you have to say Negro, you have to say mulatto if you want to keep everything. And it's really about a complex tension between the wife and the husband, because he wants to accept the change or the time or whatever, accept this role as a Negro in order to protect and save his future, his family. He wants his children and his children's children to grow up on this land that was given to him by his father and his father's father. His wife, Minerva, wants him to man up and be that Choctaw warrior that she knows that he can be, and stand up to the white people and fight. So they're both, it's really an interesting argument over the pride of the Choctaw. Like, should you stand up and fight for what belongs to us, knowing full well that you more than likely are going to lose everything and be forced on a reservation? Or should you comply for the salvation of your future generations? So that's essentially the play in a nutshell. One actor is a really like one of my best friends, Ryan Sett. He is I've known Ryan from when he was like fairly new at acting and seen him grow into this point. And he knows my work so well that no matter what role I put him in, he's going to bring what's needed to the role. He has the work that he does and just his overall temperament is so perfect for the role of Eliza, because it's almost that he's a man, but he's also kind of soft spoken. But then when he needs to be like a man, as we say, a man, he can man up a bit if that's kosher to say. But he he has that very well where he likes to Ryan himself likes to be not passive, but he likes to allow the possibility for all answers and all solutions without trying to create conflict. And I think that's perfect for the role of Eliza, because Eliza is trying to figure out the best solution with the least resistance. And I think Ryan's natural temperament works well for that. And Minerva, she's just that fiery, strong, woman like I've seen in my family. And she's being played by Tiffany Taylor, who is, I believe, a mulatto woman. And so she has obviously that look, but she just the bite that she brings. I told her to make sure that even with the bite, the love is still there and you can feel it. It feels very palpable between the two. Like you could tell the love is there, even though they have opposing viewpoints. And then Maurice Kessler is playing Mark Heron. Funny thing, he's a Jewish guy from the North. And when I offered him the role, he's like, is it okay for a Jewish guy from the North to be playing this Southern white racist guy? I was like, it's fine. You did well when I heard you read it before. I'd love to have you do it now. And he's just giving so much. There's a quiet, powerful force with him. There's that moment. There's that, because racism doesn't have to be overt and yelling out slurs and stuff like that. It could be quiet and with a look. It could be the tone of how you say a certain thing, not tone being like elevated, but even if it's like very straight tone and very matter of fact, you can feel and hear the intention behind it. And he captures the danger of Mark Heron so well. And I know people have asked, well, if he's a white man in the South in this time period, why does he let this happen? Why does he let that happen? Because you have to think about it. He might be a white man in the South, but he's not a white man in charge. He's a foot soldier doing what his boss told him to do, and that was to get this census taken. So he's not going to do anything against that. So he does have the conflict even of him being offended by these Choctaw Indians who he feels are less than them, offering them this land that he probably wants for himself, but having to do all this because his boss says so. There's going to be bite behind it, but it doesn't have to be raw in your face racism like everybody else. Do you know what I mean? I think this is a great cast, and the all the like underlying tensions that they bring to the story just elevate it so much more. Little Black Bear is a very dear and near and a piece that's near and dear to my heart, because I am an American Indian. Some people choose to say Native American. I have a lot of I have a lot of culture in my background, but I grew up understanding and knowing that we were Choctaw. Primarily because I grew up sort of around my Choctaw family and going to family reunions, powwows, seeing my family and knowing this is my culture. And it was very it was very good and powerful just having that culture. I didn't think about it at the time, but it was just powerful having that culture be around me and understand that I was Choctaw, even though I didn't look quite like everybody in my family. Um, and and But the problem is that I'd go to school, and then all of a sudden, and I tell people, "Oh, I'm Choctaw. We had this family reunion, and I got to, hang out with my cousins." And they'd be like, you're not Indian. You're Black. You're African." And I would get picked on for saying that I was a Choctaw Indian, and I'm like, "Oh, well, why can't I be Choctaw? That's what I am." And they're like, "No, you're not." So I used to get picked on by that a lot, and so at some point along the line, I started to hide from my own identity and just claim African or African American, because that's what people identified me as. And that's the thing that would get me picked on the least, or the least, picked on the least. And it became this thing. I didn't realize it was a point of trauma for me until I did Shakespeare and Company this year, the month-long intensive. And that's New York sounds you hear in the background, police sirens. So anyone seeing the interview, I'm in New York. No, but I, at Shakespeare and Company, I thought other issues that I had in my life would be the triggers and the traumas that I would need to release. And I released those pretty quick, but there was the funny thing about trauma is, if let's say you have 5 traumas, the 5 major traumas, you won't really pay attention to number 5 if 1, 2, 3, and 4 are like super big. But then when you work through 1, 2, and 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4, all of a sudden you realize that there was a 5th trauma there the whole time. And sometimes it might have been your biggest trauma, but it was more subtle than the others. And so I think that's what happened. I thought all the other issues that I had were the real issue. But once I worked through those, I realized that the real trauma was the fact that as a little boy, I knew myself to be, a Black Choctaw Indian, and people in my school was like, "You're not Black. You're not Choctaw. You're African." And that actually created a big trauma for me that I didn't know about. And when I released it, I wanted to tell a story that was, I guess, representative of who I am. And so I did. Me and my mom and my aunts all got on ancestry.com, and we went back and we found so much information about our family, so many wonderful things. One thing is that our ancestry goes back to like 1384 Wales with a crest and all, like family crest and all of that. Our family used to own a castle called Coedy Castle in Glamorgan, Wales. That's on one side, obviously, but I found out so much information about some of my Indian ancestors who that I didn't know about. Like, one beautiful thing was that that I had an ancestor who they named Mary because they couldn't say her real name, and she was part of the Namkeg tribe, but she had 2 children by this Welsh settler named Nathaniel. And Nathaniel died pretty young, and according to the records, he might have died because he had 2 children with an Indian woman. But she lived to one record says she lived to 107. The other record said she died at 96. But either way, she lived a long and beautiful life. And it was just so much information that I found out. But one thing that I really discovered was that in the 1800s, there were a lot of, the census started in August 2nd, which is my birthday, 1790. But in the 1870s-ish, they created this census specifically for minorities. And in the census they created only had 4 categories: Negro, mulatto, Negro slave, or mulatto slave. And it was a tool that they used to identify So essentially, this was before the Dawes Act came out in 1887, but it was a tool that was essentially used to force Indians to identify as Negroes or mulattoes, because the land inherently belonged to us. But if you are no longer considered an Indian, you don't have the claim to the land that the Indians had. And so it was like a political thing, or a little, I don't know what the correct word was, but it was like a clandestine operation to basically force Indians to either identify as not Indian and keep their land, but pay taxes on it to, the white people who owned the land, who now own the land. Or if you didn't claim, or if you did claim Indian, what we later discovered was that they built these reservations and forced them on it. Do you know what I mean? That happened later, but it was based off of these censuses that were given out. And so I based my story around my third great grandmother Minerva, and also Elizel, and how they in the 1870s lived as two Choctaw Indians, one dark skinned like me, one light skinned, one mulatto, could pass for white, and how they were faced with that same choice. A white man comes to their door and says, you either take this deal and claim Negro and mulatto, or you continue to be what you are, and then you'll get the consequences later. And I just felt like I got all this information through, research and family, research, and looking through our family records and the historical records on our family. But that's just it was just a story that isn't being told. When we think about slavery and things like that, we just think about the settlers and the Africans, which obviously some of my blood is of African descent as well, but a lot of my blood is of Indian descent. Do you know what I mean? And so one big struggle that I've had, and one thing that I've been fighting for as an individual, is I don't like to be identified as an African American, because I know a lot of people feel very comfortable, like, oh, my friend who's African American. I'm like, but by saying that, you are negating everything that makes me who I am. You're putting me in a category of people by labeling me with Africa, which I love Africans. I think Africans are some of the most beautiful people in the world, but I don't know any African. I don't know any Africans in my family. All I know are Indians and like American Black people. Do you know what I mean? I don't know anyone from Africa. I can't name one. Well, there's one person in my family that I know is from Africa, but she's not blood relation. She married one of my Indian cousins, and they're together, and she's from Nigeria, but she married into the family. The family itself, I've known, have always been like white people, Indian people, and just like regular, not regular, but, American Black people. And I always felt offended when people and I noticed, if you notice, like a lot of Black people don't like to be called African Americans. We don't call each other African American. And I mean, some do, but a lot of us don't. And I think, or at least from my experience, a lot of people that I know, we prefer to just be, because I think another. Sorry, this answer is going on really long, but one thing about that is, did you know historically every name for Black people that we've had, from the N-word, from Negro, from colored, to African American, are all names that was given to us by white people to make themselves comfortable? The only name that Black people ever, I would say, ever really at least claimed was during the Black Arts Movement, and Black Power movement, Black Arts Movement, when James Brown said, "Say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud." Then they started groups like the Black Panthers. We became Black people. Everyone became proud to be Black, and there's Black Power. All that was from us taking this name and saying, this is our identity. This is who we are. Because a lot of us aren't African. A lot of us didn't come from Africa. A lot of us don't know people from Africa. A lot of us might have ancestry from Africa, but we have ancestry from other places too. And to call us one is negating all the rest. And so I think to sum all that up, I feel like this story was very important because it was to show a story that no one really hears. It was to put out information about slavery that existed. The Indians were there as well. Slavery wasn't just white people and Africans. The Indians were there as well. The Indians were the ones who had our lands taken from us. We were the ones who were put in slavery as well. We were the ones who, there were some who became slave owners. There were some who were massacred. We were all like our stories were in that as well as my African side. Our stories were in that as well. But when you think of slavery, you hear African and white. And you hear about the transatlantic slave trade from Africa to here, but you don't hear about my ancestors who were already on this land for 4,000 to 8,000 years before Africans were ever even brought over here. So I felt like that was why I wrote this story. What do I want the audience to get out of this play? A lot. One, I want them to see that, like I said before, there are stories that are not just black and white. There are stories that there are other, what I think because of the film industry and just through education and things like that, we forget that there were other people on this planet besides Africans and Europeans during slavery. China still existed, Japan still existed, the Philippines still existed. Everyone was having their own fights and their own issues and their own oppression, but the American Indians existed too. We were already here before slavery was ever started. Like the Choctaw, according to the research that I had done, the Choctaw had been here for 4,000 to 8,000 years before slavery ever even stepped foot on, like slavery ever even happened. So, but the problem is that because we talk about slavery, we only talk about Africans being brought over from Africa, beaten, lynched, whipped, and forced to pick cotton and stuff like that. There were a lot more stories happening. And this isn't necessarily a slavery story because I don't personally like to write slavery stories, but this is a story that happened during the time of slavery. And I want people to understand, one, I want the audience to see that these are my people too. I want the audience to see that not only are these my people, but Native lives matter just as much as anybody else. We're constantly in this country fighting about equality and being proper and what's okay to say and what's not okay to say, and not offending this person, not offending that person. But the biggest offense of all is that they took this land from, essentially from my ancestors. And no one still really addresses that. And I think this will be a beautiful start to many more stories, hopefully from me, and maybe inspire other people who also have Native ancestry to tell their stories. Like I said, I always try to put a little bit of me into my stories. And I looked at some records and I've created this story off of the records that I looked at, but hopefully this will open people's eyes to the fact that our story exists as well. And by our story, I don't mean African, because yes, a certain percentage of my blood is African, but I'm talking about my American Indian blood. That story exists as well. And we have to start treating it as such. I had someone, an actress, like, this is a bit off topic, but it isn't. One night I posted a bunch of photos from the 1800s to show that American Indians and a lot of tribes, especially Southern tribes, looked like me or darker than me on a regular basis. And that this modern Hollywood image of what they consider a Native American to be this European looking person who, ethnically ambiguous. Yes, there are some that look like that. I have cousins that look like that, but there are a lot that look like me too. I have one of the most striking things I remember from going to one of my family reunions was seeing a younger cousin of mine. He might have been like 12 or 13 at the time. He was completely dark, like he was completely dark, like just skin was dark. And yet he had long, straight, dark, beautiful, smoky hair that went all the way down to his thighs. And he looked like everyone else. He was just dark. And I was like, this is what people need to see. And I hope people get that as well. But I posted this Facebook post about showing dark-skinned natives and dark-skinned Indians from different tribes. And I was telling them, don't identify, I said on the post, don't identify me as not being an American Indian because you think I look like something else. And then someone responded, all Black people have some bit of Indian in them. It doesn't change the fact that they're Black or they're African or something like that. And I was like, but you are the very person that I am fighting against in this situation, because you are negating the part of me that is, to tell me that I'm not, because I have to identify with what you feel comfortable identifying me as. You feel comfortable identifying me as African American because it fits your movement. So I have to identify as African American because you tell me. You're like, forget the fact that you're Choctaw, forget all that. You're still African, and I won't stand for that. And I made a vow to myself that I will never, from this day forward, I made a vow in January that from this day forward, I would never identify myself as an African American ever again, because I'm not. And I want this story to inspire the audience, for the Black people in the audience who might have multiple cultures in that background, to let them to identify. Yes, it's great to have that African pride of your African ancestry, but have pride for your other ancestry as well. Don't negate this because of that. And that's kind of what I ultimately hope the story brings out in people. And also the opportunity to educate people who don't know about this, so that they can move forward, making better decisions about how to approach people of different ethnic backgrounds. What am I looking forward to watch with the Black Voices event? I'm looking forward to watch Little Black Bear and to see how the audience receives it. But it looks like there's only 3 of us who are performing that evening. I don't know if there's a talk back after that, but I'm also looking forward to seeing other people's stories, because every artist, whether actor, writer, musician, their art is always different from the next person because they're coming from their own experiences, and seeing other people's perspectives and sharing mine and just seeing how people receive that. Why are groups like EAG important? I believe EAG is important because I believe anyone who is avidly trying to break down barriers is important. And one of the instructors is a white lady, and something very touching that she said the other day was, and she probably doesn't realize she said it, but she was talking about the election and Kamala, and also talking about equality for minorities and Black Lives Matter and all of that. And she said, I've been following Black Lives Matter religiously because I'm trying to figure out what I can do to help Black people, like what I can do to aid to this movement, what I can do, what part can I play in helping Black people achieve their goals of equality. And that was very powerful because most people don't say that. Most people are like, oh, that's their thing. I don't have anything to do with that. Or they just want this and they want that. And so I feel like anyone who's reaching out or trying to be the change that you wish to see should be commended. And I think the Episcopal Actors Guild, for them to even create an event called Black Voices, is them wanting to be that change, them wanting to show that there are Black voices out there. And it's a charity event. It's pay what you will. And the money that they make, they're using it to supplement actors' needs, because in this pandemic, a lot of actors have a lot of needs. So I think just the overall philanthropy of this organization is special, because you don't see that often. So I think that's why that's what's beautiful and unique about them. Hi, my name is Christopher Raishun Marshall, and if you enjoyed this conversation about my play Little Black Bear, and also the Black Voices event by the Episcopal Actors Guild, come and attend. And if you want to learn more about me, go to my website, www.christophermarshall.net.